Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
Hey everyone, it is Nux and I am back with another video, and today, whoo boy, yeah, we're gonna talk about this. So let me just start this out by saying that the day that this trailer dropped, it was an insane day, not only for stuff that was just in personal life, in my personal life, like it was pretty insane what was going on at the time. I'm dealing with college and all that stuff, but the day that we got this trailer, earlier in that day, we got a teaser for Toy Story 4, which got completely blown out the water by this trailer, by the way. Like, it's crazy we live in an era where Nintendo is actually rivaling Disney, of all people. Actually insane. But yeah, we got a teaser for Toy Story 4, and I just kind of was whatever on that, because I still think the series should have ended on 3. But we also had the passing of Stan Lee. God rest his soul. Yeah, so that was really sad. And then, well, the Stan Lee passing happened later, but in the middle of the day, that's when we got this. So my emotions that day were just all over the place. Like, I'm having a hard time just recalibrating it now for you guys, but that's not what we're going to talk about. Not about that day necessarily, but about this trailer itself. So it's kind of funny because in one of my previous videos, I actually did mention the Detective Pikachu movie as a thing that might happen. Like, I had an article on it where there have been multiple stories of them building up to this movie. It's been a thing in development for a while. But the thing is, though, because of how little news was coming out on this movie, I assumed that it was something that was probably never going to happen, like something that wouldn't get past the planning phase or something like that. So I assumed that this movie would never really surface back up. The main thing that would probably determine where video game movies are going is stuff like the Sonic movie, the Mario movie, and things of that nature. There's a lot of video game movies coming down the pipe works. But this dropped completely out of nowhere for me. Like, I was completely caught off guard because I wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't thinking that they were actually going to go through with the idea of a live-action Detective Pikachu movie, of all things. Like, for those of you who don't know, Detective Pikachu is not the main Pokemon brand. It's not something that's a part of the main series or anything. Detective Pikachu is a spin-off game in the Pokemon world where a Pikachu can talk suddenly and decides to become a detective and is partners with this human boy, and they go on some wacky adventures and solve some mysteries and stuff like that. Like, it was an interesting idea for a Pokemon spin-off, I'll say that. But the fact that they would dedicate an entire live-action movie to it before even doing anything that remotely followed the main games or anything, that just didn't sound right to me. But here we are. We have a trailer for this movie, and I'm not going to show anything from the trailer or any crazy footage or anything like that, because the last thing I want is to get copyright bombed. I already get that enough, and I don't even monetize my videos, and so I don't need any more heat for that. But yeah, so what do I think about this trailer? I'm gonna be honest, I'm super mixed. Now, I'm not necessarily against this trailer, like I'm not 100% on the negative side where I say, oh, this movie looks absolutely horrible. Like, the main thing I felt when I first watched this trailer was absolute horror, because the idea of live-action Pokemon, it's always something that we've made fun of and something that we've explored with, but it's never something we've seen executed in an official medium. So to finally see it in the form of this movie is just so crazy. Like, especially to me, like, I didn't think that they were ever gonna make a live-action Pokemon movie. But again, here we are. So when it comes to the look of the Pokemon, it varies between the Pokemon, because like, just seeing them in live action is just so bizarre, and there's just so many different opinions I have about each Pokemon and how they look in their live action format. So let's talk about the main star in the forefront, which is Pikachu. Pikachu actually looks pretty good. Like, he's definitely a little more furrier and fluffier kinda. He has that realistic fur property to him, and it's definitely bizarre for sure, but it's actually not that bad. Like, what I imagine the Pokemon would look like is like completely different forms of themselves from the games. Like, the thing with the Pokemon in this movie is they at least resemble, like, you can tell that they resemble the Mons from the games. An example would be Jigglypuff. Like, Jigglypuff's one of the Pokemon that definitely garnered a lot of attention because it has all this fur and fuzz all over it, and we're not used to seeing Jigglypuff like that at all. Jigglypuff usually is just kinda, doesn't really have much texture to it. It's kinda just a flat pink ball. And the thing though is, it kinda makes sense that Jigglypuff has some fur because we do know it does have the hair twirl. And that obviously either has to be fur or hair or something. So it makes a little sense that Jigglypuff is furry like that. It's just so weird to actually see it in action. And I like how this is actually the anime Jigglypuff too. Like, that's something I noticed throughout this movie. This movie definitely is, even though it's like based on a game that's not familiar with the Gen 1 area, it's definitely having elements in there, in that Gen 1 area, so that people can at least recognize that, yes, this is indeed Pokemon. Even if you haven't played a Pokemon game since Red and Blue, you should be able to recognize a good amount of these Mons, because there's quite a few Mons from Gen 1 in this movie. But the thing is, there is a lot of Pokemon variety as a whole. There are Pokemon from multiple generations throughout this movie, or this movie trailer, I should say. A example is Greninja. We see Greninja multiple times throughout this trailer, and it's... Now, Greninja in the actual movie trailer itself actually didn't look too bad. He actually looked kind of cool. But this model, though, like, what is that? It's absolutely terrifying. But the actual Greninja in the movie trailer didn't look that bad. But yeah, other than Greninja, we do see all three of the Kanto starters. One of the ones that has a big highlight scene is Bulbasaur. We see an entire Bulbasaur herd, and in that herd we actually see Morlul, I think it's called. We actually see a Gen 7 Pokemon, meaning this movie has Pokemon all the way up to even Gen 7, which is actually pretty crazy to me. Gen 6 was one thing because the original Detective Pikachu game did have Pokemon up to Gen 6, so it makes sense that this movie would go up to Gen 6 like that game did, because it's based on that. Like, I see some people say, well, why didn't they just go with Kanto only? Like, you already know where I'm going with this. Obviously, they didn't go with Kanto only because you couldn't really make a movie in that format with this, what they're doing. Like, with Detective Pikachu, it relied on Pokemon other than just Kanto Mons. And the plot had a lot of key Pokemon that weren't from Kanto. They could probably work around that and just rewrite a lot of them and just make it a Gen 1 movie if they truly wanted to. But why not just use all the Pokemon you have at your variety? Yes, you're still going to use a lot of those Gen 1 Pokemon because they are the most popular ones and they are the ones that most people recognize, so it does make sense. I don't have a problem with that. I know there's been a big misconception since my whole Gen 1 hate thing that people think that I hate Gen 1 as a whole. And as I explained in that video, I don't hate Gen 1, I just hate the concept that Pokemon has to revolve around it all the freaking time. Like, the series can be allowed to adapt and evolve, but I'm not going to do a rant on that. Let's move forward. So again, some other Pokemon we see Mr. Mime, we see Psyduck, and they also just look kind of weird. They're not horrible because, again, you can recognize who these Pokemon are. They don't look horrible necessarily, they just look so bizarre to see in live action, especially Mr. Mime. Like, Mr. Mime has always kind of been a mildly creepy Pokemon, but just seeing him in live action is so weird. He even has little fuzz hairs on the top of his head. It's wild. But yeah. And Charizard is just another one that is definitely weird. Like, he definitely looks like a Charizard. He's big, terrifying, he's a dragon-like creature. Like, that's the Charizard we know. But Charizard also kind of looks like he has some fur or something, or maybe that's not fur. Maybe that's just the texture and the way it looks, but it still looks weird to me. Like, overall, the main thing that caught my attention with this trailer is the Pokemon. We just see so many, and it's so bizarre to see these Pokemon in this form. Like, it's crazy stuff, man. It's crazy stuff. But I guess getting aside from the Pokemon, let's talk about some other things, like the actual plot itself, because definitely the look of the Pokemon and seeing them in live action is the main thing that caught people's eye with this trailer overall. Like, that's the reason why this trailer has a crazy amount of views right now. But let's talk about the plot itself. Now, in terms of the plot itself, it looks alright. Like, again, it's just so weird to me they decided to do Detective Pikachu as the first really big Western Pokemon movie that isn't an anime one, as opposed to something at least kind of based on the main games. But I'm not complaining 100%. Like, some people say, oh, but the main game plot is boring. It's been done to death over and over, which I can kind of agree. Like, I definitely do agree that if the movie was just basically like Pokemon Origins, where you're going around getting badges and stuff like that, that would be kind of boring. Like, it would be much better if the movie had a sort of plot to it that didn't feel like a Pokemon plot, but you know what I'm trying to say. Basically, it would be cooler if the movie was a plot that was a general story, but just so happened to have Pokemon in it. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, a plot that would just be, go get the badges, go beat the Elite Four, go become champion. That's boring. That sounds a bit too video game-like. With Detective Pikachu, since it's a spin-off, and it's not necessarily on the path of the games in that format, it's definitely different by default. So I'm kind of seeing more and more why they might have chosen a spin-off game to use rather than base it off the main games. Now, in terms of the cast and stuff like that, the main two people we see is the guy who plays the human boy, who is Pikachu's friend. I think Tim Goodman is his name, or his character's name. I don't know the actor's name off the top of my head, but honestly, I'm mixed a little on him. Like, it's cool and all, you know, that he's in the movie, and I think he's doing an okay job, but it's a bit too Disney Channel tier for me. It's a bit, I don't know how to describe it at all. I'm just gonna move on. And then you have, of course, Ryan Reynolds, who is the voice of Pikachu in this movie. I'm just gonna say it. Honestly, I don't feel Ryan Reynolds for Pikachu. Not because of the fact that Pikachu is talking or anything like that. I just think he's not a very good Detective Pikachu. Detective Pikachu kinda had a more gruff voice and, actually sounded like a detective. Ryan Reynolds basically sounds like Ryan Reynolds. His voice doesn't really sound any different. He sounds exactly like himself. As a matter of fact, he almost sounds like his Deadpool incarnation, so the Deadpool comparisons were like flying off the charts with that. But yeah, I'm just not feeling the cast, the main two actors so far, because the main dude, he's about acting about Disney Channel tier. There's nothing really that amazing about his action that really stood out to me. And Pikachu, Ryan Reynolds, his performance just isn't doing it for me. But everything else is definitely caught my attention, and I'm definitely interested in seeing this movie and how it turns out. Alright, so let's get to my final thoughts on this trailer. So overall, I am definitely more than intrigued, because obviously by default I am, because I love Pokemon. But just the bizarreness of this trailer and how out of left field it is just has caught my attention completely. And even if the story doesn't end up being that great and the movie isn't as great as some people are saying it could be, I do think that this is a very interesting thing overall, because it's just so unique and different to see a video game property like Pokemon within this take. And I think it actually does Pokemon a little bit of justice. Like, my problem with video game movies such as the old Mario one and possibly the upcoming Sonic one is they lose all purpose of the original video gaming series. It feels like they're just making stuff up and throwing the characters in this dumb world that doesn't connect to the games and stuff like that, and it doesn't feel like there's any creativity and uniqueness about it, and those characters honestly don't belong in live action in the first place. With Pokemon, this feels like a Pokemon world, because you have humans who are just going about their business and, being humans, and then you have Pokemon who live alongside humans, and they're definitely more bizarre and crazy and wacky. And that's what I liked about Pokemon. It's a world where humans interact with these crazy creatures all over the place, and this trailer definitely captured that perfectly. Alright, well, until the movie comes out or until we get more information on it, I have not much to say. And it's going to be interesting to see how Nintendo approaches movies in the future now that we have this trailer. Also, another thing I want to mention is I like how it uses the same song that was in that Smash 64 commercial all the way back in the day. Like, that's kind of funny. Nintendo must really like the Turtles. But yeah, pretty much that's all I have to say. I'm looking forward to seeing where else Nintendo Cinema goes in the future and where this movie goes specifically. It's going to be a key part in deciding what direction video game movies could go forward. Heck, they might still make them even if this movie was like complete trash. It could still do well because it's Pokemon, it's Pikachu. Like, those names alone can bring in the money. But then again, the Mario movie didn't exactly hit it out the park just because it had Mario attached to it. So we'll have to see how this goes. Alright guys, this has been Nux, and I'm out. Peace.